No one noticed him at first. That was how it had always been, and honestly, that was how he preferred it. Marcus Hill was the kind of man people described with words like quiet, polite, or hard to read. At 58 years old, he had learned that staying invisible was sometimes the safest way to survive. He showed up on time, did his work, and went home without drama. No complaints, no arguments, no attention. In a world where loud voices got rewarded, Marcus had built his life by keeping his head down. Every morning at 6:10 a.m., he parked his old gray sedan in the same spot behind the warehouse. Every morning he walked through the employee entrance with his lunch bag in one hand and a coffee he brewed himself in the other. And every morning he nodded at the security guard who barely looked up from his phone. Routine was Marcus's armor. He worked as a warehouse supervisor at a mid-sized logistics company on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the rent on his small apartment. It covered his bills, and every month, without fail, it allowed him to send a little money to his mother, something he never missed. Stability mattered to Marcus. At his age, stability wasn't comfort, it was survival. At work, people saw him as dependable. If a shift needed coverage, Marcus stayed late. If inventory needed rechecking, Marcus handled it. When others complained about management, Marcus stayed quiet. He believed that if you followed the rules long enough, they would protect you. That belief would be tested sooner than he ever imagined. That Tuesday started like any other. The warehouse buzzed with forklifts and scanning machines. Pallets slid across concrete floors. Orders were packed and sealed. The air smelled like cardboard, dust, and coffee gone cold. Marcus was reviewing shipment logs when something caught his eye. One of the high-value electronics pallets, brand new, sealed, expensive, was missing from its assigned slot. At first, he didn't panic. Mistakes happened. A pallet moved without an update. A forklift driver put it in the wrong aisle. It wasn't unusual. Marcus picked up his radio. "Can you check aisle 14?" he said calmly. "I think a pallet got moved." There was a pause. Then the reply came back, hesitant. Marcus, it's not here." His brow tightened. Marcus checked the digital inventory again. According to the system, the pallet was still inside the building. According to reality, it wasn't. 10 minutes later, the warehouse manager arrived, followed by 2 supervisors and the head of security. Their faces weren't curious, they were tense. That's when Marcus understood this wasn't a small mistake. The missing pallet was worth over $60,000. The warehouse floor grew quiet as word spread. Machines slowed. Conversations dropped to whispers. Workers watched as the managers walked straight toward Marcus. "Marcus," the manager said, loud enough for others to hear, "you were the last supervisor logged into the system near that pallet." The words landed heavy. Marcus looked up, genuinely confused. "What? I reviewed the shipment logs. I didn't move anything." The head of security crossed his arms. "Your ID was used to access the inventory controls around that time." Marcus's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "That doesn't mean I moved it. Anyone on my shift could have—" "Let's step into the office," the manager interrupted. The walk felt longer than it was. As Marcus followed them, he felt the weight of eyes on his back. Co-workers who had joked with him the day before now avoided his gaze. Others stared openly. A few exchanged looks that didn't need words. Inside the office, the door closed. Security footage appeared on the screen. A figure in a warehouse vest moved near the missing pallet. The camera angle was poor. The face was unclear. The timestamp matched Marcus's shift. The room went silent. The manager leaned forward. "Marcus, can you explain this?" Marcus stared at the screen. "That could be anyone. You can't even see the face." The head of security didn't respond. He just looked away. "But your login was active and you were assigned to that zone." In that moment, Marcus felt something change. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a decision. He had followed the rules his entire life, and now the rules were turning on him. Outside the office, the warehouse hummed back to life, but for Marcus Hill, everything he had built, his reputation, his stability, his quiet dignity, had begun to crack. And this was only the beginning.
By the end of that day, everyone knew. No official announcement was made, no emails were sent. But the warehouse had its own way of spreading news. Quiet conversations by loading docks, whispers near time clocks, eyes darting away when Marcus walked by. He could feel it the moment he stepped back onto the floor. People who usually nodded now pretended to be busy. Forklift drivers who joked with him every morning suddenly kept their distance. Even the security guard at the entrance watched him more closely than before, his phone forgotten in his hand. Marcus kept his head down. He told himself it would pass, that once the footage was reviewed properly, once the inventory audit was complete, everything would clear up. He had nothing to hide. He had never taken so much as a damaged box home. Still, something felt wrong. At the end of his shift, the manager stopped him before he could clock out. "Marcus, we're placing you on temporary administrative leave," she said, her tone rehearsed, "until the investigation is complete." Administrative leave. It sounded neutral, professional, almost polite. But Marcus understood what it really meant. "You're not welcome here right now." "Am I suspended?" he asked. "No, not officially, but we need to limit access while security looks into things." "Am I being accused of stealing?" Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. The manager hesitated for just a second too long. "We're just following procedure." That was answer enough. Marcus walked out of the building carrying the same lunch bag he had brought that morning, untouched. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. He sat in his car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. He had worked there for 6 years. 6 years of reliability, 6 years of overtime, 6 years of quiet loyalty. And all it took was one missing pallet for everything to change. That night, Marcus didn't sleep much. His phone buzzed once, then twice. A coworker he barely talked to sent a message. "Man, I hope you didn't do it." Marcus stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "I didn't." The reply came back almost immediately. "Yeah, that's what everyone says." Marcus set the phone face down. The next few days were worse. He wasn't allowed back into the warehouse, but news kept reaching him anyway. Another coworker stopped returning his calls. A friend from a different department unfollowed him on social media. Someone posted a vague status online. "Crazy how you never really know people." No name was mentioned. None was needed. Marcus went through the security footage again in his mind, over and over. The blurry figure, the vest, the timing. He knew he hadn't moved that pallet. He also knew how easy it was for doubt to grow when proof wasn't clear. On the 4th day, security called him in for questioning. The room was small, white walls, one table, 2 chairs. A folder sat in front of the investigator. "Marcus," his man flipping through papers, "you've had access to inventory systems longer than most employees here." "Yes," Marcus replied. "And you know how to override certain checks." "Yes," he said again. "Do you have financial problems?" Marcus looked up sharply. "No." The investigator raised an eyebrow. "No debts, no pressure?" "I pay my bills. That doesn't make me a thief." The investigator didn't argue. He didn't have to. Because Marcus could tell from the questions that they had already built a version of him in their minds. A version where he was capable of this. A version that fit neatly into their suspicion. When the interview ended, Marcus asked one question of his own. "Has anyone else been questioned like this?" The investigator closed the folder. "We're looking into all possibilities." It was the kind of answer that sounded fair, but meant nothing. When Marcus left the building, he noticed something else for the first time. The world treated him differently now. At the grocery store, a clerk watched him closely as he walked the aisles. At a gas station, a security camera followed his movement on a small screen above the counter. Even in his own apartment complex, a neighbor he used to greet avoided the elevator when Marcus stepped in. No one said anything out loud. They didn't have to. Silence had become suspicion. And Marcus was learning a painful truth. When people decide who you are, your words stop mattering. Still, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't explain himself to rumors. He wouldn't change who he was. If the truth was going to come out, it would have to stand on its own. But what Marcus didn't know yet was that the truth had been hiding in a place no one bothered to look. And when it finally surfaced, it would force everyone to confront something far more uncomfortable than a missing pallet.
By the second week, the waiting became unbearable. Marcus had always believed that time favored the truth, that if you stayed calm and patient, facts would eventually rise to the surface. But as the days dragged on, he began to understand something far more unsettling. Time didn't automatically reveal the truth. Sometimes it buried it. The warehouse investigation continued without him. Emails went unanswered. Calls were returned late, if at all. Each time Marcus reached out, he was met with the same careful phrases. "We're still reviewing. It's under process. We'll contact you." His bank account felt the silence first. Administrative leave turned out to be unpaid. Rent was due in less than 2 weeks. His mother called one evening, her voice gentle but concerned. "You sound tired," she said. "I'm fine," Marcus replied automatically. He didn't tell her what was happening. He didn't want her worrying from miles away. She had worked too hard raising him to see him dragged through something like this. But worry had a way of leaking out anyway. Marcus stopped sleeping altogether. At night, he replayed every detail of that day, the missing pallet, the footage, the investigators' questions. He questioned himself, even though he knew better. Had he logged out properly? Had he stepped away from the terminal too long? Could someone have used his access? Then a memory surfaced, clear, sharp, uncomfortable. The day before the pallet disappeared, Marcus had helped a new employee log into the inventory system. The man had said he forgot his temporary credentials. Marcus remembered hesitating, then typing them in himself to save time. At the time, it seemed harmless. Now it felt dangerous. Marcus sat upright in bed. He hadn't mentioned that detail during questioning, not because he was hiding it, but because no one had asked. They had been focused on motive, not opportunity. The next morning, Marcus called security. "I remembered something," he said. "Someone else may have had access to my login." There was a pause on the line. "Why didn't you mention this earlier?" the investigator asked. "Because you didn't ask," Marcus replied evenly. Another pause. "Send us the name." Marcus did. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a flicker of hope. But hope, he soon learned, could be fragile. 2 days later, he received an email. "We have reviewed the information provided. At this time, it does not change the direction of the investigation." No follow-up, no questions, no acknowledgement, just dismissal. That was the moment something inside Marcus shifted, not into anger, into clarity. He realized they weren't searching for the truth anymore. They were searching for confirmation, and he was the easiest answer. Meanwhile, life outside the warehouse continued to shrink. A longtime friend stopped inviting him to weekend gatherings. Someone he had known for years said, half-jokingly, "Man, you better not bring any warehouse secrets with you," then laughed alone when Marcus didn't respond. Even small interactions felt heavier now. At a corner store, Marcus paid for groceries in cash. The cashier counted the bills twice, her eyes flicking between his face and the register. Marcus noticed. He always noticed now. One afternoon, Marcus returned to the warehouse, not to go inside, but to sit in his car across the street. He watched shift changes. He watched who came and went. He watched patterns. And that's when he saw something odd. A familiar forklift driver loaded a truck near the side dock, one that wasn't scheduled for pickup that day. The driver checked his phone, glanced around, then continued. Marcus frowned. That dock had been quiet for months. Later that evening, Marcus pulled up the public delivery logs online. Most people wouldn't know they existed, but Marcus did. He had helped digitize them years ago. There it was, a delivery marked rescheduled, time-stamped exactly 30 minutes after the missing pallet alert. 30 minutes. Marcus's heart began to race. If the pallet had been stolen, it had left the building fast, too fast for the story they were building around him, too organized for a lone supervisor acting on impulse. This wasn't a random theft. This was planned. And for the first time, Marcus understood something terrifying and empowering at the same time. He wasn't just being accused, he was being used. Used to close a case, used to protect someone else, used because he was quiet and they assumed he wouldn't fight back. Marcus sat in the dark of his car, the warehouse lights glowing in the distance. He took out his phone. He started writing. Dates, times, names, logs. If no one was going to look for the truth, he would. And what Marcus was about to uncover wouldn't just clear his name, it would expose how quickly people chose comfort over justice. Marcus treated the next few days like a full-time job. Every morning, he woke up early, brewed coffee, and sat at his small kitchen table with his notebook and laptop. He no longer waited for calls that never came. Instead, he focused on what he could control: facts. He started with access logs. Marcus knew the inventory system better than most people in that building. He had helped train half the supervisors, including the manager who now avoided his calls. The system recorded not only who logged in, but how they logged in: manual entry, saved credentials, or badge scan. That detail had been overlooked. Marcus requested a copy of the system activity through a formal data access request. It took 2 days, but eventually a partial log arrived in his inbox. He read it slowly, carefully. Then he saw it. His login had been used, but not in the way he normally accessed the system. Marcus always used his badge scan, always. He hated typing passwords on shared terminals. But on the day the pallet disappeared, his credentials were entered manually. That meant someone had typed his username and password, someone who already knew them. Marcus's pulse quickened. He cross-checked the timestamps. The manual login occurred during a 15-minute window when Marcus was in a safety meeting on the opposite side of the building, confirmed by attendance records and multiple witnesses. That alone should have cleared him, but it hadn't. Why? Because no one had bothered to look that closely. Marcus printed everything. Next, he turned to the delivery logs. The rescheduled truck still bothered him. Officially, it had been marked as a routine change, but Marcus noticed something else. The authorization signature didn't match the usual supervisor. It belonged to the warehouse manager, the same manager who had first pointed the finger at Marcus. Marcus didn't jump to conclusions. He kept digging. He pulled older logs and compared handwriting styles on scanned approvals. The difference was subtle, but there. A rushed signature, slightly slanted, different pressure points. Someone had signed in a hurry. Now, Marcus had 3 critical facts. His login was used manually. He was not physically present at the terminal. A truck was rescheduled unusually fast, with management approval. This wasn't coincidence. This was a chain. All Marcus needed was one person willing to look at it objectively. So he did something risky. He emailed corporate. Not HR, not warehouse security, corporate compliance. He wrote calmly, clearly, no accusations, just documentation. I believe there has been a procedural oversight in an internal investigation. Attached are system logs, attendance records, and delivery discrepancies that warrant review. No emotion, just truth. The response came the next morning. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will be conducting an independent review." For the first time in weeks, Marcus exhaled. Inside the warehouse, things started to shift. Supervisors were called into private meetings. Security officers began reviewing footage again, this time with different questions. The warehouse manager started acting nervous, snapping at employees over small mistakes. Word spread quickly. Corporates involved. Marcus felt it even without stepping inside the building. The tone of emails changed. "Just checking in? Let us know if you need anything. We appreciate your patience." Patience. The same patience they hadn't offered him. 3 days later, Marcus was called in. This time, the room felt different. 2 corporate representatives sat across from him. A laptop displayed logs Marcus already knew by heart. "We owe you an apology," one of them said. Marcus didn't respond. He waited. "The evidence shows your credentials were misused while you were elsewhere. Additionally, there are irregularities in shipment authorizations that point away from you." Away from him. The words landed quietly, but they carried weight. "We're continuing the investigation," the representative added, "but you are no longer considered a suspect." Marcus nodded, not in relief, in confirmation, because he knew all along. When Marcus left the meeting, he noticed something else. People looked at him again, really looked at him, some with confusion, some with guilt, some with fear. The same silence that once judged him now followed him differently, because the truth was no longer invisible. And in the final part, the truth would do what it always does when it finally stands up. It would demand accountability.
The announcement didn't come quietly. On a Monday morning, every supervisor and manager in the warehouse was called into an emergency meeting. Work slowed, forklifts stopped, conversations fell into uneasy whispers. By noon, the entire building knew something serious had happened. By the end of the day, everyone knew what it was. The warehouse manager had been terminated. Officially, the reason was listed as gross procedural violations, but people understood what that meant. The delivery logs, the rushed approvals, the misuse of system access, it all pointed in one direction. The missing pallet hadn't vanished by accident. It had been moved with intent, and Marcus Hill had been used as cover. Security footage was reviewed again, this time with faces enhanced, angles rechecked, timelines aligned. The figure in the vest was identified. Not Marcus, not even close. The forklift driver Marcus had seen that evening was placed on leave and later admitted he had been instructed to move the pallet without asking questions. The instructions came from above. Marcus was formally cleared, not quietly, publicly. An email went out to every employee. Following a comprehensive review, we have confirmed that Marcus Hill was not involved in the recent inventory incident. We regret the distress caused and appreciate his professionalism throughout the process. Professionalism. The word felt small compared to what Marcus had endured. He returned to work the following week. Walking back into the warehouse felt surreal. The same floors, the same machines, the same walls that had once closed in on him now felt distant. People reacted in different ways. Some approached him immediately. "Man, I'm sorry," one coworker said, eyes downcast. "I shouldn't have assumed." Others avoided him completely. Guilt had a way of making people uncomfortable. A few tried to joke to lighten the mood. Marcus didn't engage. He didn't need apologies spoken out loud. He had learned something deeper than anger. He had learned who people were under pressure. Management offered Marcus his job back with full back pay. They even hinted at a promotion, a gesture, an attempt to make things right. Marcus listened. Then he surprised them.
"I'll return, but I don't want a promotion." The room went quiet. "I want policy changes," Marcus continued calmly. "Shared logins eliminated, independent reviews before accusations, and training on how investigations affect people." They didn't argue, because they couldn't. Change followed. Security protocols were updated. Oversight increased. No one said Marcus's name in meetings, but his influence was everywhere. Outside of work, things changed too. Friends who had gone silent slowly reached out. Some apologized. Some didn't mention the incident at all. Marcus accepted the silence for what it was. He didn't need to explain his dignity to anyone. One evening, Marcus sat on his balcony, watching the city lights flicker on. His mother called. "You sound lighter," she said. Marcus smiled. "I am." He didn't tell her everything. He didn't need to. Some battles didn't require retelling. They only required surviving. Marcus had been judged without being heard, accused without proof, isolated without cause, and yet he never raised his voice. He let the truth do the work. That was the lesson people remembered most. Not the missing pallet, not the fired manager, not the scandal, but the man who stayed calm when the world decided who he was without asking. Months later, a new employee asked Marcus quietly, "How did you stay so calm when everyone turned on you?" Marcus thought for a moment. Because panic doesn't protect you. Truth does. The warehouse kept moving. Life kept going. But for those who witnessed it, the story lingered. A reminder that judgment is easy, silence is powerful, and truth, no matter how ignored, always finds its way back to the light. The truth doesn't need noise, it needs time. If this story made you think, don't just scroll away. Someone out there is being judged the same way right now. Like the video so this story reaches them, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Marcus's place? Most people judge before they understand. Have you ever been judged unfairly? Share your experience in the comments. Someone reading it might need it today. If you believe stories like this matter, subscribe for more real stories about truth, justice, and second chances.